specifically with a bass like this giant here, right? It's really going to help you. Look at the neck on this thing. It is giant. It's like a aircraft carrier. Planes could try and land on this thing at any moment. Now, if you've played a bass like this in the past with a super wide fingerboard, you will already know that they can be a real nightmare to get around. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a 6-string bass either. There are 5 strings and 4 strings, and I'll show you in 1 minute, that also have really wide necks. So today I want to share 3 specific things that you should be doing when playing a bass with a wider neck like this, because when you do, it'll just make it way easier to play. So tip number 1 is that you must play with your thumb on the back of the neck. If you're one of these players who plays with the old baseball bat, you know, like holding a baseball bat like this grip, it is not going to work on a bass with a huge neck like this, okay? You need to get that. You need to be able to make the stretch right across the fingerboard, and the only way that you can do that is to get the thumb and put it on the back of the neck, and that will give you the reach across the instrument that you're going to need to be able to play an instrument like this. Now, a fun exercise for you to do right now with me, just to prove how impactful it can be when you get that thumb on the back of the neck, is get your hand, right now, do this with me, okay? Get your hand, and I want you to hold it like this, okay? Like you're about to karate chop. Now, what I want you to do is, see the wrist here? I want you to bend it backwards. So bend it backwards, that's it, and then do this with your fingers. Now, it's worth pointing out that when you play with that baseball bat grip on the neck, your wrist is always going to be like this, like I've just asked you to do, right? It's always going to have that bend. So let's do that again. Karate chop, back, and then fingers in the air. It gives you that weird S bend, right? Now, turn them towards me. Now try and open your fingers. Try and stretch them apart. It's impossible, isn't it? You just can't do it. Now, all I need you to do now is just flatten off that curve. So we go back to the karate chop. Now try and open your fingers. Way easier, right? When you're playing the bass, if you're doing it with that baseball bat grip, when you try and open your fingers, it is impossible. It's a physiological impossibility to be able to open your fingers. So if you've ever thought, oh, I'm one of them players that I just can't stretch much, it's probably a technique thing that's happening here, okay? So get that thumb on the back of the neck, specifically with a bass like this giant here, right? It's really going to help you. It's really going to help you move around that fretboard and get that stretch that you need, but also be able to come all the way down here, get those lower notes on the B and the E string without having to get yourself in a big hot mess. Now, tip number 2 is really to learn the neck in positions, and I'll tell you which positions in 1 minute. But the reason why you want to be learning it in positions is, and I want you to put your hands up in the comments, give me a virtual hand up in the comments. Have you ever played a 5-string bass or a 6-string bass and you actually think of it as just a 4-string bass with an added B string, or a 4-string bass with an added B and a C string, and you don't really use them? You kind of know that they're there. And sometimes when you're playing a D, you know you can throw in a lower octave, but you daren't use it, and you definitely don't know any of the notes on the B string up there, right? Just give me a hands up, give me a kind of like a, it's just me and you here, we can be truthful, nobody else is listening or watching, right? Just let me know in the comments. Now, don't worry, you're not alone. There are so many 5-string players, 6-string bass players who don't really know those other strings, and they just really think about it as a 4-string with these added strings and don't really use it, right? So how do we stop that? Well, we can learn the neck in positions, right? The positions that I really like using are frets 1 to 5, then frets 5 to 9, and then 8 to 12. They're my 3 positions on the neck. If you're a member of SBL, you'll have heard me talk about this before, right? So that means when I take some like triad exercises, for instance, let's take a C major triad, First of all, I make sure that I know that C major triad in that first position. Okay, so there's C all the way down here on the B string, right? And I make sure that I can play all of the notes of the C major triad or whatever triad or arpeggio or scale it is, but within that area, so I really know all of that area. And then maybe I'll do like an F major triad. And then maybe a B flat major triad. And then I do the same thing, but in frets 5 to 9. My C major triad from the lowest note possible. Now my F major triad from the lowest note possible. And then once I've done it in that position, then I'll move the exercises to that next position, which is frets 8 through 12. Now, before we get on to the third and final tip, I also want to talk about 4-string basses and 5-string basses because they can have wide necks too, right? This amazing precision bass by the guys over at Modern Vintage, headed up by Rob Elric. Hey Rob, if you're watching. This has got a traditional, like early 60s P bass neck, which is 44 mil, right? So 44 mil. There are several 5-string basses out there which will have a 44 mil neck. So you do get 4 strings, such as this one, and obviously all of the early P basses as well, that do have wide necks. And then on the 5-string front, just think about the, I know some of you Warwick guys out there, or Warwick, I think that you pronounce it. You know, some of them streamers, you know, the wide neck streamers, those have massive necks. So this isn't just a 6-string bass thing. This is to do with 4 strings, 5 strings, and 6 strings as well when it comes to wide necks. By the way, if you're wondering what this bass is, it's a Yamaha John Patitucci signature. It's an absolute corker, and we're actually giving it away right now. This is this bass and this bass. I'm kind of hiding behind these basses here. Both of these basses and a bunch of other basses. We've got 2 F basses. We've got over $30,000 worth of basses. And it's a completely free giveaway that you can enter. I'll put a link down below that you can click on, or you can just go to scottsbassgiveaway.com and that will link you straight to the giveaway. Again, it's completely free to enter. So you've got to be in it to win it. Click that link or go to scottsbassgiveaway.com and get yourself hooked up in the giveaway. Now, on to tip number 3. And tip number 3 is actually not to do with this hand. Even though we've got like a huge fingerboard here, it's nothing to do with here. It's actually to do with this hand here, because when you have a wide neck, like on an instrument like this, what happens is you can have some real problems with muting the strings down here, okay? And what happens is you'll play a scale, for instance, like this. Can you hear all these other strings ringing out? What do? How do we actually stop all of that happening, okay? Well, tip number 3 is we need an effective muting technique, okay? We need to use like string muting down here on the plucking hand. There are 3 main ways you can do it. The first one that is really common is floating thumb. That's when you put your thumb on, and as you move across the bass, the actual thumb moves with you. You can see what it looks like. There we are. So it's moving all the way across like that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is what I use, and it's a movable anchor. So it looks like I'm using that floating thumb thing, but I'm actually not. I'm actually just the tip of my thumb is like moving across and actually clearly resting on each of the strings. It's not floating, it's not like gliding over. I am definitely, you know, it's anchored, but then the back of the thumb is what mutes the strings, right? It mutes the strings as I move across. And the third way of muting is how Jacko and John Patitucci mute, is when he was playing, he'd actually use his ring finger and his little finger and mute the lower strings. And then as he moved down, like onto these lower strings here, well then his thumb would take care of the other ones. So you end up with your little finger and your ring taking care of the B and the E string, and then your thumb kind of takes care of the what would that be? The A and the D string, and then you're playing down here. And also remember that you've also got muting going on in your left hand as well. It's worth taking that into account. Anyway, hopefully you are pumped and enthused to go grab a wide neck bass and give it a try. I absolutely love this bass. I love the P bass as well. I actually love wide necked instruments. I prefer wide necked P basses over thinner necked P basses. It's just the way I like them. And remember as well, if you haven't joined the giveaway, all you need to do is click the link below this video or go to scotsbassgiveaway.com and you can win this bass or the P bass or $30,000 of other basses and shenanigans like that. Now with that said, as always, take it easy and I'll see you in the shed.